Truth Revolution.
Hey, welcome to Truth Revolution. This is where faith and reason meet. I am Pastor Dave. That's Pastor Jeff. We are from Revolution Church in Salina, Kansas.
That's right. And if you are in Salina, Kansas, you should totally come out to Revolution Church.
Totally, dude.
Totally, dude. We're meeting at 10 o'clock, 11:30, 5 p.m. We did the 1 p.m. for Easter, but we're just doing 3 services right now.
For now.
Probably going to kick that up soon to 4.
Maybe.
But so you can keep your ears listening. But hey, you got to come out. No matter, we want you to come as you are. Doesn't matter what you wear. I mean, just look at Dave. I mean, really.
You wore a button-down shirt today just so you could make fun of me and my T-shirt. Man.
Normally I barely wear anything. So we're just
sad.
We're glad you're joining us today for the show. If you're not in Salina, Kansas, you can always watch live online, or you can message us and we'll help you find a great church wherever you're at. But today we have a very special guest because we love truth, we love Jesus, we love the Holy Scriptures, but we also love science. Yeah. And so we've got a molecular biologist with us today.
Yes. Author and scientist, biochemist Fuzz Rana writes and speaks extensively about evidence for creation emerging from biochemistry, genetics, human origins, and synthetic biology.
Whoa.
Fuzz graduated with the highest honors from West Virginia State with a BS in chemistry and went on to earn his PhD in chemistry with an emphasis in biochemistry from Ohio University. He pursued postdoctoral studies in biophysics of cell membranes.
You can't even pronounce what he studied.
That's right. At the University of Virginia in Georgia, he is vice president of research and apologetics at Reasons to Believe. He is dedicated to communicating to skeptics and believers alike the powerful scientific case for God's existence and the Bible's reliability. See, once I got through all that scientific stuff, I was able to stay.
Hey, Dr. Rana, welcome to the show again.
Well, thanks for having me, guys.
Absolutely. It's always so good to have you on the show. Man, just meeting with you and anyone from Reasons to Believe. You guys are so intelligent. You connect faith and science so well.
We're fanboys.
Well, thank you. That's kind of you to say.
We're doing something interesting today. I had messaged you and said we just want to put together a show that's not necessarily deep down into one. We want to kind of cover just some of the top 5 biological reasons to believe in a creator.
Right.
So these are the top 5 biological evidences. When I messaged you this and asked you for these top 5, was this a thing that took a little while to put together, or did you off the top of your head just go, you know what, I know exactly what these are?
Oh, it took me about 5 minutes to whip it out. In fact, I have a much longer list. The difficulty was what to take off the list.
Wow.
That's
I came up with the list pretty quickly.
Nice. Maybe if we run out of material, then we can go on to other things that you cut out. But let's just go through here, because before I even ask you what the 5 evidences for a creator are, because we want to know God's real, we want to know what these evidences are. Why would you want to even make the case that biology demonstrates a creator? Why is that even important?
Well, I mean, there's 2 reasons. The first is that the Bible tells us that God has revealed himself to us through the record of nature, that we not only should expect to see evidence for his fingerprints, but also evidence for his character and his nature. So as a Christian, I'm curious, I'm interested in how does the discoveries in science point to a creator for that reason alone. But also, many people think, both skeptics and seekers, but even it's true for people within the church, that biology represents a unique challenge to the Christian faith because of the idea of Darwinian evolution, the grand claim that the origin, the history, and the design of life could be explained through evolutionary means. And so I think many people are going to be surprised that biology points to a creator in light of that pervasive view of Darwinian evolution.
That is certainly a view of a lot of people, that Darwinian evolution has got the cornerstone on truth in the biology department in wherever you go. I just read an article by I think it was Stephen Meyer, which basically talked about this idea of consensus, and just because people say there's consensus, don't always assume that it's real. Would you agree with that too, or do you think evolution is pretty consensus, pretty widespread?
Well, I would say that on one hand, evolution is the mainstream interpretation of the biological record. And so most biologists would argue that evolution is the way to understand, again, biological systems, biological history. But on the other hand, when you delve into the scientific literature, it's very clear that the evolutionary paradigm does have deficiencies in accounting for the origin of life, for things like the Cambrian explosion, for even things like human exceptionalism and consciousness. So the paradigm does have some deficiencies. It's just that those deficiencies are often overlooked by many people in the scientific community, but they're great places to kind of push on as a Christian apologist.
That's good. Okay, so that being said, we kind of set the stage. Now we want to know, how does biology actually point to a creator? So aside from Darwinian evolution, just even in a second, we can look at that and say, okay, maybe there's some mechanisms there that make sense. But aside from all of that, what are the reasons that biology might point to a creator? And you said number one, the elegant design of biochemical systems. Give us a little clue into this. What is the elegant design of biological or biochemical systems?
Well, this was something that deeply impressed me when I was a graduate student. When I began my graduate studies in biochemistry, I was an agnostic at that point in time, and it was the elegant designs of biochemical systems that convinced me there had to be a mind behind life. And what's intriguing to me is that the defining features of biochemical systems are identical to those features that we would recognize as the work of a human designer. This is tapping into the old watchmaker argument of William Paley,
right,
where he argued that when you look at a watch, it's a contrivance. I love that word. It's made up of a number of parts that interact in a precise way to accomplish a purpose. And that is perfectly descriptive of biochemical systems. But as part of that contrivance that describes, again, biochemical systems, they're ingenious, they're elegant, they're sophisticated. But on top of that, we also are now discovering biochemical systems that are analogs to human designs. And so many people are probably familiar with the fact that protein complexes form literally machinery inside the cell, that motors with rotors and stators and drive shafts and lever arms and hinges. These are incredibly sophisticated, highly efficient machines. The machinery that manipulates DNA, which is a molecule that stores information in the cell, which, by the way, is digital information. That machinery literally is functioning in the same way that a computer system functions at its basic essence. We have quality control systems inside the cell. So a lot of the ways in which the cell's processes take place are like assembly line manufacturing operations, replete with very sophisticated quality control systems to make sure that the processes take place in an error-free way. And so when you look at that, it really gives a very powerful life to kind of a neo-watchmaker argument where we can, again, say that just as a computer requires a computer maker, life must require a divine computer maker, because at the core of the cell's operations is a very sophisticated computer system.
Now, you're talking about the piece of the cell that acts like a motor. It's got a stator. It's got a propeller. And I can't remember for the life of me the name of that part of the cell.
It's the bacterial flagellum.
The flagellum, yeah.
But there's a whole bunch of other molecular motors in the cell that don't get a lot of publicity. All the attention is focused on the bacterial flagellum, but there's a whole ensemble. You could probably make a list of easily 100 protein complexes that literally are machinery in every sense of the word.
That's crazy. And, maybe our video guy can throw up a picture of the bacterial flagellum. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think it can rotate something like 10,000 or 100,000 RPM. And in like a case of a quarter second, it can reverse directions.
That's exactly right. And it's electrically powered, by the way. And it operates at near 100% efficiency because you don't have friction influencing the operation of the motor when you're at that scale.
Jeez.
But in fact, these motors are so much like motors that scientists are actually isolating them from the cell and interfacing them with nanotechnology as a way to power, nano designs. And so they're machines in every sense of the word.
And we don't want to miss this. I mean, it took humanity 100,000 years to develop a motor. And once we developed this motor, we looked inside ourselves and we found
a motor.
Oh, wow, a motor. That's fascinating. And you say there's 100 other things like that inside of ourselves.
Oh, easily. In fact, in my book, The Cell's Design, I even came up with something I called a watchmaker prediction, which basically is saying that if the watchmaker argument is valid, that as we invent new technology, what I'm predicting is that we'll actually see examples of that technology in the cell. We just don't recognize it as technology because we haven't invented it yet.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a prediction that I put on the table. And in fact, there's a couple of instances since the book was published where that has actually happened.
And again, this is the book, The Cell's Design by Dr. Rana.
Wouldn't somebody like kind of owe God some royalties or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Maybe he should have applied for a patent or something.
Some people would look at this, though, and say, if this is designed by God, why are there mistakes? Why do some people's cells not work right?
Yeah. Well, that's a very complex question, but it's a very important question. And at the end of the day, we live in a world that is governed in part by the second law of thermodynamics, which means things are going to proceed towards decay and disorder. And the second law of thermodynamics, I think, is actually part of the design of the universe. If you didn't have the second law, you wouldn't have biochemistry. Without the second law, work and hence metabolism would be impossible. And without the second law, membranes wouldn't form, proteins wouldn't adopt complex structures, DNA wouldn't form a double helix. But a trade-off of having the second law in place is that there will be mistakes that happen, but I don't see those as bad designs, but just simply consequences of the way in which the world is structured.
Yeah.
But that opens up a whole very interesting and involved conversation. But long and short of it, it's a trade-off that's part of the world that we live in.
Yeah. And we also want to recognize that when we start asking questions like, well, if God's real, why would God do it like this? We're also not necessarily arguing that God doesn't exist. We're saying, if there is a God, why is God this type of God? And why is the universe the way it is? And the Christian worldview has always allowed for pain and suffering. In fact, our worldview and the way we see things doesn't make sense if pain and suffering is not real. Sin entered the world.
And let's pick up on this idea of trade-offs, because that actually leads us to the fourth reason why I think God exists.
Yeah.
And that is, if you live in a world where there are fixed laws of nature, you have to have trade-offs. There's just no way around it. We could change the laws that govern our universe, and there would just be a different set of trade-offs that we're confronted with. And so the question is, why would God create a world where there are fixed laws? Well, the fixed laws, first of all, allow us to be morally accountable. If there weren't fixed laws of nature, we could never be morally culpable for anything. It's only because we know what our actions are going to do, we can predict the outcome of our actions, that we are morally culpable. That requires fixed laws of nature. But fixed laws of nature also allow us to discover the world around us. It makes science possible. It makes the universe intelligible. And so if we're going to look at the universe and see evidence for God's fingerprints, there have to be fixed laws of nature. And so the idea of trade-offs, while maybe troubling on the surface, actually makes a lot of sense.
So when you say that fixed laws of nature make us morally culpable, does that mean like if I throw a rock at Dave and it wounds him, like that's a law of nature that's always true and I know that?
That's exactly right. And so you can't say, I didn't know the rock would hit you in the head. Right? You can't say that.
Right.
Because you know that is a predicted outcome of that behavior.
Okay, well, Dave, I'm going to have to revisit what happened this morning with us then.
Okay.
Later. But anyway, we're coming up to the break. We just finished one out of the 5 reasons.
Right.
And
what have you gotten us into?
Dr. Rana's got another interview after us today, so we're not going to be able to
He's not gonna make
long.
it.
So we're going to have to buzz through these fast. We're going to have to buzz through them. And we're going to do it. But hey, they need to get to our website. What is it?
TruthRevolution.tv.
And there you're going to find links to reasons.org. You can find links to the book, The Cell's Design by Dr. Rana, which he just mentioned. Also, he's done the book, Creating Life in the Lab, which we're going to talk about next. how life in the lab demonstrates God's existence. This is going to blow your mind. It's going to be awesome. TruthRevolution.tv. We'll be right back.
Truth Revolution.
And we're back. We're talking to Dr. Fuzz Rana about the 5 biological evidences for a creator.
Yes.
Interesting.
All right, so we're from Revolution Church. Thanks to everybody who shares this on social media. Thanks to everybody who messages us in with questions, pulls us off the street, attacks us with questions.
For every share you give, Jeff will give you a donut.
That is entirely not true. But anyway, number 2 reason, the top 5 biological evidences for a creator. Number 1 was the elegant design of biochemical systems. Number 2, attempts to create life in the lab demonstrate the role intelligent agency plays in the origin of life. All right, Dr. Rana, take us through this one.
Well, there's an area of biology that's called synthetic biology, and one of the goals of synthetic biology is to create artificial cells in the lab, to start with chemicals and assemble them into these chemical super systems that begin to assume the properties of a cell. And there's been some remarkable progress made towards this end, but kind of the bottom line is that when you look at the work that's done, one of the things that you walk away from every study in synthetic biology with is the idea that if it wasn't for the ingenuity of the researchers involved, those molecules would never organize into a cellular entity. And so you have these scientists that are the best minds in the world developing these very sophisticated, elaborate strategies that they then go in the lab and they execute in the form of laboratory protocols carried out by highly skilled scientists working under very specifically controlled conditions using sophisticated instrumentation to pull off even making a very crude protocell. And so when you look at that, study after study after study empirically demonstrates you've got to have intelligent agency to turn chemicals into cells. Yeah. And I like to call this an empirical argument for God's existence because it's based on empirical evidence. It's based on what we've learned from these laboratory studies. So I see this as a very powerful complement to the watchmaker from biochemistry.
It makes so much sense. I'm remembering an article that I read. I don't know if it's on Huffington Post or Drudge Report or whatever. An article I read that said scientists working with cells discover how evolution works and show that evolution is real. So I went into this article and they talked about how the scientists would mess with these cells and they would change and evolve into something different. And I'm like, how did they get evolution out of this? This is intelligent design. And that's basically what you're talking about, right?
That's exactly right. And I find that this is an argument that most lay Christians should be able to articulate. And discoveries in synthetic biology show up all over the place in Science in the News articles because it's such important work and it's such interesting work. And so if Christians are able to connect those scientific discoveries with a case for a creator, I think it just will open up opportunities for them to share their faith in a powerful new way. I love this line of evidence because it's so accessible to a layperson.
And your book is called Creating Life in the Lab. And that book's available everywhere, right? Amazon, Reason.org.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Hey, we're going to jump out, do a Bible contradiction, then come right back to this.
Bible contradiction.
All right, Bible contradiction today is about abortion.
Abortion.
Yeah. Is a fetus, is it or is it not a human?
Okay.
So Psalms 139:13 says, "For thou hast possessed my reins, thou hast covered me in my mother's womb." Jeremiah 1:5 says, "Before I formed thee in the belly, I knew thee." Exodus 21:22, however, says, "When men have a fight and hurt a pregnant woman so that she suffers a miscarriage, but no further injury, the guilty one shall be fined as much as the woman's husband demands him, and he shall pay in the presence of judges. But if injury ensues, you shall give life for life."
So they're saying in Exodus, if there was death, if you guys got into a fight and you killed somebody, you had to lose your life too.
Right.
But if you just killed a baby in the womb, it was just a fine. So it's saying the Bible doesn't even recognize a fetus.
So what's going on here?
Well, okay, this is really clear. I mean, he starts quoting Exodus 21, but he obviously didn't read the verses before it. So we're just going to do C for context in our cracked acronym. And you just read a little bit earlier, verses 12 to 14. Dave, read this.
It says, anyone who strikes a person with a fatal blow is to be put to death. However, if it is not done intentionally, but God lets it happen, they are to flee to a place I will designate. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death.
Okay, accidental death is never punished the same as purposeful death, even with adults. So here he's trying to say, oh, look, this fight accidentally killed a fetus, and so God's okay with it. Well, no, just verses earlier, it was talking about if it's an accident, it's a different scenario. There is no biblical law talking about, well, if a guy, takes a knife and stabs the womb to try to kill the baby, then what to do. It just says things like, if you purposely take a life, then your life should be taken.
Right.
So that's not a contradiction at all. They just didn't read the context. Dr. Ron, anything else you'd like to add to that?
No, that was a great answer.
All right, good. I thought it'd be good to have a biochemist here on the day we talked about evolution. But anything you want to add about just a fetus in the womb? Anything like that?
Well, I think, what you're doing there is really very important, because at the whole heart of the abortion controversy is what is the status of a fetus. And as a biochemist, I cannot come up with a scientific argument to indicate that the fetus is anything other than a human being. Right. To me, if the fetus is a human being, scientifically speaking, there's just no other way to draw any other conclusion. But you have people playing games with this concept of personhood as a way around that implication. So I think, what the identity of the fetus is a very, very important question.
Good. All right, that's the answer for our contradiction today.
Bible contradiction.
All right, let's get back into the biochemistry, the biological evidences for a creator.
Okay, so far we've done the elegant design of biochemical systems. We've done attempts to create life in the lab, demonstrate the role intelligent agency plays. And number 3, this is the third evidence for a creator biologically, designs in biology and biochemistry inspire the development of new technologies. So technology proves there's God. What's up with this?
Well, this is something that's really very exciting. There's an emerging area in engineering called biomimetics and bioinspiration, where the goal is to turn to designs in biology and biochemistry to inspire new technology. Or in some instances, the engineers just simply copy the designs directly from biology in order to implement new technology.
Interesting.
And this is highlighting, again, how elegant those designs are, but raises some real questions, I think, for the evolutionary paradigm, because the nature of the evolutionary mechanism is it's unguided, it's purposeless, it's without direction, it's co-opting pre-existing designs and cobbling together new designs. Those don't sound like the types of systems you would want to turn to inspire new technology.
Right.
But if designs in biology are the work of a mind, then biomimetics makes perfect sense. And, we talked a little bit about biochemical systems. Well, DNA is an information storage system that stores digital information. And in fact, we're now looking to use DNA to store digital information. One of the big issues we have currently is a data storage crisis. How do we store the data that we continue to generate? DNA is a great molecule along those lines. We mentioned the fact that the cell's machinery that manipulates DNA functions like a computer. Is to spawn something called DNA computing.
Wow.
Where we're building computers out of DNA and enzymes from the cell. And then finally, people have discovered that DNA functions like a wire and are looking to use it in nanoelectronics. And in fact, its wire properties are unlike anything that you could manufacture with any other technology. So here's an example where these incredible designs in biochemistry are paving the way for new technology. And to me, it only makes sense if you think about that application in a theistic framework, in a Christian worldview framework.
Wow, that's awesome. And if you actually want more on that, Dr. Rhonda put together a DVD, How to Build a Case for Biochemical Design. And that one's available at reasons.org, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so all right. And really, you got into number 4 there a little bit. Biological and biochemical systems appear to be designed for discovery. Like God wants us to discover these things? He wants us to discover him?
When you look at biochemical systems, they're the same throughout the living realm. People refer to biochemistry as being universal. All organisms employ DNA. We all have the same genetic code. We all utilize proteins. And so what's interesting is many times evolutionary biologists will point to those shared features and say, well, this is evidence for common descent, that we came from a last universal common ancestor and the biochemistry was already set in place. And so all life on Earth has this shared biochemistry because of common descent and in a shared evolutionary history. But another way to look at that is that it reflects common design, and that the biochemical systems are so optimized, it's hard to envision how you would think of an alternative form of biochemistry. So you could see that optimization in the shared features as reflecting common design, not common descent. But this leads us now to the fourth argument. But because there's shared biochemistry, the biological realm is intelligible. If every organism had different biochemistry, there's no way that we could learn anything about biology. It would be a hopeless morass of information that we could never sort through. But because we have shared biochemistry, we now can study a bacterium, E. coli, and by studying that bacteria, we can learn about human biochemistry, believe it or not.
Wow.
And so it's like the world around us is designed for discovery, including biological systems. And as we make discoveries, we see not only evidence for God's fingerprints, but these shared designs are actually unleashing God's providence. So, for example, the rave today is this CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing system that people are looking to do all kinds of really interesting things with genetic engineering. It turns out that system is actually found in bacteria, and it's a way in which the bacteria combat viral infection. And we realized that we could take that technology and that gene editing that happens in that context actually works.
All right, I'm going to have to stop you there. If you want to find out what he says next, you got to go to truthrevolution.tv. Catch us there.
Truth Revolution.
Welcome to the podcast. Talking to Fuzz Rana about his 5 biological evidences for a creator.
All right, and go ahead and give us the last 10 or 15 seconds. Repeat that for us again.
Well, one of the rages right now, as I was mentioning, in bioengineering is the CRISPR-Cas9 gene editing system that we think has a lot of potential for doing some very interesting things in terms of genetic engineering. It turns out that system is actually found in bacteria, and it's used as a defense mechanism to ward off viral infection in bacteria. And it turns out that we can take that bacterial biochemical system and actually use it to gene edit human cells. And so this, again, is an example of how these shared design features actually allow us to not only discover and learn about biology, but also to unleash God's providence for us. And so it's as if God wanted us to know about him and to have access to his technology, in living systems by making everything have common design.
Gotcha. That makes sense. All right, now we've got about 2 minutes left, maybe 1 minute. So sum up number 5 for us, biology's big bangs. Why does this show evidence for a creator?
Well, one of the things that's interesting is that when you look at the history of life on Earth, every time there's biological innovation, it happens suddenly and explosively. The origin of life happens instantaneously, and the very first life on Earth are bacteria, but they're incredibly metabolically complex. They just show up again in an instant. When it comes to the origin of eukaryotic cells, complex cells that make up organisms like human beings, they show up explosively. This is called the eukaryotic Big Bang. The Cambrian explosion is the first appearance of animal life in the oceans, and it happens explosively. When it comes to human exceptionalism and human behavior, it shows up explosively in the archaeological record. And so these sudden appearances, I think, defy evolution, but are exactly what I would expect if a creator is intervening in the history of life to bring about his creative purpose.
Wow. Wow.
That's so good. Thanks for joining us today. I know you got another interview you got to go to, so we're just going to cut it off right there. But again, if you want his books, The Cell's Design, or Creating Life in the Lab, or his DVD, How to Build a Case for Biochemical Design, you can find those on reasons.org, or you can just come to truthevolution.tv if you've been there before.
We'll link them.
We'll link right there. As always, it's great to have you on the show, and everybody from reasons.org, we appreciate what you guys do so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. God bless you.
God bless.